At sea, the Athenian navy set sail with 100 warships called triremes. Their mission? To conduct covert raids on the Peloponnesus. On land, Perikles' plan was more controversial. In fact, it was a totally unconventional approach to war.
Perikles' strategy was this. It was to avoid, at all costs, the standard way of fighting a war. A battle between hoplites of one side against hoplites of the other.
Perikles decides to evacuate the 200,000 acres of Attica and send its population of farmers with their families, perhaps over 100,000 altogether, inside the walls of Athens, and to ride out these invasions on the premise that Athens can be supplied by sea.
We've got a secure port. We've got massive walls around our city. We can import all the food we want. We can keep control of our empire.
They could do that because they could collect money from their imperial empire. They could maintain a fleet. They could rule the seas. It was all perfect.
Spartan has no tradition of siegecraft, so they're not going to be able to breach the walls of Athens. But they have this tradition of Greek warfare that you march into an enemy's sacred land. It's an affront to their masculinity, it's an affront to their sovereignty, it's an affront to their national pride, and you hack away a few olive trees, you burn a few acres of grain, and the enraged farmers in their frenzy come out to meet you on a plane, and then you wipe them out, and the issue is settled.
But the Athenians refused to budge. Instead, they remained barricaded inside the city, further protected by separate walls, including the long walls that extended nearly 5 miles to the harbor at Piraeus.
The Spartans are pretty much bamboozled by this. This isn't good. And this basically leaves the Spartans with no response. The Spartan system was based on when we move into your territory, you move out, and we chop you to ribbons.
Frustrated, the Spartans continued to pillage the fields of Attica, an area the size of Rhode Island. But Sparta was ill-equipped to resupply such a massive army. So, waiting for the Athenians to come out and fight was simply not an option. 1 month after their arrival, the despondent troops packed up and headed for home.
The first year, Perikles seems a genius, but he didn't count on the idea that a city that was designed to house perhaps 75 to 125,000 inhabitants was ill-equipped in the summer months to house 250 or 300,000 inhabitants. It doesn't have the sewage facilities, it doesn't have the water facilities, it doesn't have the housing.
Pericles' biggest miscalculation, however, had nothing to do with sanitation or overcrowding.
Where he went wrong was in underestimating the effect on morale of being in effect cowardly. Going behind your walls, seeing the Spartans come and doing nothing. That went against the grain of the Greek code of hoplite morality.
When the Spartans marched on Attica the following summer, Pericles' strategy was clearly under fire. Yet no one could possibly have foreseen what would happen next.
Athens was hit by a terrible plague, which wiped out something like 1/3 of the population in Athens. Think about what that would mean. Translate that into American terms. I mean, you're talking about what, 90 million people?
The deadly disease, probably brought aboard a grain ship from Egypt, turned the streets of Athens into corridors of horror. The city was littered with dying men. Young and old, rich and poor fell victim. The plague played no favorites.
The effect of the plague was to cast Athens, and consequently its army and navy, into a state of disarray.
And suddenly, the Athenian game plan doesn't look great. It also kills Athens' leader, Pericles, and suddenly the man with the plan is no longer around to pursue it.
The death of Pericles left Athens prey to hostile factions and reckless leaders. But what also died was even more profound: his extraordinary vision.